Hey, what's going on guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'll be comparing the Nike Free Metcon 5 to the Nike Metcon 9 to the Nike Air Zoom TR1. So 4 major differences to note between these shoes is number 1, their midsole constructions and how that's going to translate to your training. So in the Nike Free Metcon 5, you have this medium density foam midsole. This model is designed to be good for like HIIT workouts and some moderate strength training. So with this midsole, it has a lot of flex through the forefoot. It's a little bit more rigid back here in the heel, and it has like this nice plush feel to it, but it's also stable enough for some strength training. In the Nike Metcon 9, you have a dual density foam midsole. So basically in this shoe, towards the lateral parts of this model, the midsole is a little bit more dense, and then it's designed to be a little bit more plush in the the forefoot in the middle of the midsole to give you more bounce when you're doing things like jump rope, box jumps, etc. You also have this TPU plate back here in the heel of this midsole. Now granted, this only kind of wraps the outsides of the heel. I have actually cut a Metcon 9 in half to show you that. I'm gonna link that video up there. But in the context of like midsole density, the Nike Metcon 9 is gonna be your best bet for heavier training. This midsole is gonna have the most stable or firm feeling out of all of these shoes. In the Nike Air Zoom TR1, you have this foam midsole that runs throughout, but you also have that Nike Air packet that runs throughout the entirety of this shoe's sole. So essentially you have that Air Zoom packet on top of this foam midsole. So compared to something like the Nike Free Metcon 5, this model is gonna have a little bit more of like a responsive and bouncy feel to it. And so that being said, this model is not going to be your best shoe for heavier training because this midsole is a little bit more plush and a little bit more responsive. The second major difference is their sizing and fit. Now, if you have a slightly wider foot, your best bet's going to be the Nike Metcon 9. Comparatively speaking, the Metcon 9 is going to be your widest model out of all 3 of these shoes. The second widest will be the Nike Free Metcon 5. This model is actually widened compared to the Nike Free Metcon 4, which I think was a step in the right direction. It would really be cool though to see a wide option for this model coming out in the future though. So Nike, if you watch this video, that would be really cool to offer a little bit more range with the anatomy that shoe can fit, because I do like the Nike Free Metcon 5 for a wide range of context. The most narrow feeling shoe is the Nike Air Zoom TR1. This model has more of a tapered toe box, so more of your traditional Nike athletic fitting toe box, so to speak. The third major difference to note between these shoes is their upper constructions. So in the Nike Free Metcon 5, you have a mesh upper with a lot of breathability through the forefoot and midfoot, and then you also have some textile overlays. This upper is on the lighter end regarding breathability. It's not the most breathable upper on the market, but it does a better job compared to these 2 shoes regarding their overall breathability. Now I will say with the upper in the Nike Free Metcon 5, it's not gonna be your best bet for abrasion resistance. Like this would not be a shoe that I would take through serious CrossFit workouts, but for more general cross training, HIIT training, and just strength workouts, the upper in this model I think should be plenty durable for most folks. In the Nike Metcon 9, you have a mesh upper with some haptic overlays for additional abrasion resistance, and then you also have some layers throughout that add a little bit more of like this rigid feel to this model's upper. You also have this lateral and medial overlay here on the sides of the shoe. This is designed to give you more bite and grip for rope climbing when you're doing CrossFit workouts. Of the upper constructions of these shoes up here, the Nike Metcon 9 is going to give you the most durability regarding the upper construction. However, this model's upper is also the least breathable. So it kind of has this give and take with increased durability but decreased breathability. In the Nike Air Zoom TR1, you have like this mesh / suede feeling upper construction. It's a little bit heavier and it's not the most breathable in my opinion. This model does have some ventilation down here in the forefoot, but regarding giving you like a ton of breathability throughout the entirety of the shoe's upper, honestly, it would be cool if there was a little bit more ventilation, because since this model is designed for HIIT workouts and a little bit more of like your versatile training, I think it'd be nice to have a bit more ventilation throughout the shoe as opposed to like the mesh suede and synthetic overlays and textile overlays that are on it now. The fourth major difference to note about these models is their outsole constructions. So in the Nike Air Zoom TR1, you have a full rubber outsole with a couple of breaks up here in the forefoot to give you additional mobility, and you also have some lugs up here in the forefoot. I actually really like this for turf focused workouts. That's what I think gives this shoe a little bit of an edge compared to other models focused for HIIT. If you are planning to do like cross training on turf workouts or you're doing sled work, this model has done a pretty good job regarding traction. Also, you do have a little bit of rubber protection back here on the heel as well. It's a little bit more rigid, and you have some beveling here to make transitioning into like short runs easier in this model, or at least a little bit more comfortable compared to other cross training shoes that run a little bit more flat, aka like the Nike Metcon 9. So in this model, you have a full rubber outsole with some brakes here through the midfoot. Now, I don't love the brakes in this shoe's outsole, and I talk about this in my full review, and I do have full reviews on all of these shoes, so definitely check them out. But the reason I don't love this is because when you are rope climbing, what can end up happening is this can almost like pull apart, and we have seen some athletes experience this. Also, with this material change here in the midfoot, I also find that this shoe kind of almost collapses in at times when I'm doing heavy unilateral work, so definitely something to think about too if you are planning on buying the Nike Metcon 9 solely for lifting. I don't think it's the strongest platform to date for the Nike Metcon training shoe line, but that's just my opinion. And then back here in the heel, you don't really have a ton of beveling. And with this TPU plate, it kind of cuts down on the shoe's overall potential for being a little bit more versatile. In the Nike Free Metcon 5, you have rubber tread up here in the forefoot and back here on the heel. And then throughout the midfoot, you have exposed foam. This helps give you a lot of pliability and flexibility, but it's worth keeping in mind that this is probably not gonna be your best model for outdoor training if you want this shoe to last, because these exposed foam layers here don't last the longest on concrete regarding friction. Also, if you're running outdoors in this shoe, I have ran into this many times. You get rocks stuck up here sometimes in the free tech throughout the forefoot, so something also to keep in mind with these models. So regarding outsole constructions, you have a full rubber outsole pretty much over here in the Nike Air Zoom TR1, a full rubber outsole here in the Nike Metcon 9 with obviously some brakes that I mentioned, and then in the Nike Free Metcon 5, you have the most exposed foam, thus changing kind of the intent in which I would recommend using these shoes regarding the scenarios. But that said, let's talk about the performance breakdown between these models. All right, so now let's talk about performance. Which is the best model for lifting? So I have kind of a hierarchy up here for lifting. So my top pick is the Metcon 9, my second pick is the Nike Free Metcon 5, and my third pick is the Air Zoom TR1. If you are looking for a shoe solely for lifting and you want a shoe that's going to give you the most stability, the Nike Metcon 9 will be your best bet. Has a wider toe box too to let the toes splay, and with its dual density midsole, it does a pretty good job of giving you a nice stable base to train on. Now, this has been my least favorite Nike Metcon model to date for lifting, and I talked about this in my full review. That is linked up there, but I think for most general folks, this model will work pretty well for lifting. It's just not my favorite to date, and I think for single leg work, it does kind of fall short regarding its midfoot construction. The Nike Free Metcon 5 can be a great pick for anybody who's doing like a lot of HIIT workouts, but then also loading their lifts up to about like 315 pounds. The reason I don't love this shoe for lifting is because this midsole will start to compress as you get heavier. Plus, with this shoe's exposed foam, it's not my favorite model for tackling heavy machine work. So for example, for hack squats, for leg presses, I would rather have a full rubber outsole to give me a bit more traction. And then in the Nike Air Zoom TR1, this model is okay for lifting. Like if you're working below 315 pounds, this model will also work. But you do feel that Air Zoom packet, in my opinion, it gives you a bit more bounce and a little bit less stability. And so that said, if you are on the fence between the Air Zoom TR1 and the Nike Free Metcon 5 and you do a lot of HIIT, but you also like to lift and you have a bit more of a bias towards lifting, I would say go Free Metcon 5 in that context. Now, which model is best for CrossFit? So honestly, there's only one shoe up here that I would recommend for that training context, and that's the Nike Metcon 9. Don't even consider the Free Metcon 5 or the Air Zoom TR1 for most CrossFit workouts. I think these shoes will get beat up pretty fast. Now, if it's a WOD where you're doing a little bit of like box jumps, jump rope, and there's nothing too crazy regarding the lifting or the abrasion resistance that you need, so there's no rope climbs, burpees, anything basically where you're gonna have a ton of friction on the shoe, these models can work, but the Nike Metcon 9 is a little bit more optimized in that context, so hedge your bets and go with a shoe that is going to be built hopefully a little bit better regarding its durability for that training vertical. Now, which model is better for versatile training? That's where I'm going to give the edge to the Nike Free Metcon 5. This has been one of my favorite shoes for blending strength work and more like athletic focused training sessions where I'm doing plyometrics, jump rope, circuit style work all into one session, and I might be lifting as well, so doing dumbbell or kettlebell work or maybe some moderate loading with the barbell. This shoe I think will give you the most flexibility too, and it's really comfortable overall regarding its upper construction for that training vertical. The Nike Air Zoom TR1 works really well as well. And now what I would say is if you're between the Free Metcon 5 and the Air Zoom TR1, if you are big on having a shoe that has a lot more of a bouncy feel to it, the Air Zoom TR1 will be your best bet. The shoe is interesting. I went into this model not expecting to like it, but it has kind of grown on me. However, how I kind of see this shoe compared to the Free Metcon 5 is that if you only have money for one model and you want a shoe that can do a little bit of everything, I would take the Free Metcon 5 over the Air Zoom TR1. This shoe I think is a little bit more of like a vanity shoe, or a little bit more specific to where if you want a shoe in rotation that has a slightly different feel than other training shoes on the market, that's where this shoe will work. But I think for most folks, if you only want one model, the Free Metcon 5 will give you a little bit more range. The Nike Metcon 9 is my last pick here. With its TPU heel, it's just not the most comfortable for versatile training. Can it work in that vertical? Sure. But I think with the 7, 8, and 9, they've kind of taken a hit with their versatility because this TPU plate limits their performance for short runs, jumping, etc., and it can get very uncomfortable. Now, which model is best for short runs? So the Air Zoom TR1 and the Nike Free Metcon 5 will both work in this vertical. I do think the Air Zoom TR1 is a little bit more comfortable for short runs. And so if you want that model that can be a little bit more hybrid in nature, the Air Zoom TR1 will be a good pick. Now do keep in mind with that hybrid style workout, this model will also have some cap unloading. So if, for example, you want to run like 800 meters to a mile, 2 miles, but then train and work up to like 225 pound like barbell squats, some dumbbell work, kettlebell work, the Air Zoom TR1 I think would be your most comfortable and best pick for that vertical. The Nike Free Metcon 5 works really well for short runs, like if you're doing intervals. So if you have like treadmill intervals, if you're doing sprints, if you're doing even just 1 mile runs, this shoe will work. But what I would say is with this heel construction and how it juts out, if you're not a forefoot or midfoot striker, that's where this model can get pretty uncomfortable. The Nike Metcon 9 is my least favorite pick for running with that TPU plate back here. If you're a heel striker, forget about it. This is not going to be your best shoe. This model can work for sprints and like short intervals programmed in WODs, but it is my least favorite pick for short runs. So anything above basically a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, don't use the Nike Metcon 9 for. I don't think you'll find them comfortable at all. And that has been consistent with the Metcon 7 and 8. Nike, can you please get rid of this TPU plate in the heel? Now, which model is best for daily wear? So my 2 picks up here for daily wear are the Nike Free Metcon 5 and the Air Zoom TR1. Now, in theory, I like the Nike Free Metcon 5 better. However, what I will say is with the exposed foam here, it's honestly a shoe that you're gonna wanna kind of pick your battles with regarding its daily wear use. So for example, it is rainy outside today. I would not wear this shoe because the rain getting into that foam midsole could cause it to break down faster and just leave it a little bit more dirty than I would want. So that's where I would reach for the Air Zoom TR1. You get a little bit more protection with this outsole, but comfort-wise, I think the Nike Free Metcon 5 is a little bit more comfortable regarding its feasibility for longer walks. I also like how the upper hugs the foot, but the Air Zoom TR1 can work in that vertical as well if you want that bouncy shoe for walking and then going to the gym and doing like a class or some form of like hybrid style workout. The Nike Metcon 9 is my least favorite pick for daily wear. That should not come as a surprise after my notes on its performance for running, but it's just not the most comfortable. It's a little bit too heavy regarding its upper construction because it doesn't have the best breathability. And then with this heel being so clunky, I always kind of feel like a horse when I'm walking around this shoe because you have that click with the heel. So it's just not my favorite pick at all. And that's the same thing with the 7 and 8. This TPU heel really tanks their performance in those verticals. So when it comes to the price differences between these 3 models, you can expect to pay $120 USD for the Nike Free Metcon 5, $150 for the Nike Metcon 9, and then $130 for the Nike Air Zoom TR1. If you are somebody who's much more recreational with your lifting and you want to shoot for HIIT workouts, classes, etc., go with the Nike Free Metcon 5. I think that's going to be your best value for your buck. The Nike Metcon 9's $150 price point I see as very hit or miss. I think this is probably the weakest Nike Metcon model to date, so to increase the price from $130 to $150 for this model, I'm not super stoked on that. And then $130 for this shoe, I also feel like is very hit or miss because with this shoe, again, I see it more of as like a vanity shoe. This would not be like my only shoe that I wore to train in. It would be much more of a shoe that I would wear for very specific workouts. And so if you want a shoe in rotation for that context, it can make a little bit more sense. But I think if you're between price-wise with the Nike Air Zoom TR1 and the Free Metcon 5, the Free Metcon 5 will be your better bet. So when it comes to the sizing and fit of all these models, you should be safe going true to size in all of these shoes. Now the length runs true, however their widths will vary. The Nike Metcon 9 is going to be your widest model, the Nike Free Metcon 5 is the second widest, and then the Nike Air Zoom TR1 is the third widest, aka the most narrow of these models. Now I have an E-width foot and I find the Nike Metcon 9 and the Nike Free Metcon 5 to feel the most comfortable for me. I don't really have to change my sock choice when wearing these shoes either. In the Nike Air Zoom TR1, I do notice its width, and so if you have an E-width foot or wider, definitely keep that in mind before you invest in the shoe or wear thinner socks if you plan to buy them and you know that you have a wider foot. But overall, true to size should be a safe bet in all these models for most folks. All right, so when it comes to the weight heel toe drop and insoles in all 3 of these models, in the Nike Free Metcon 5, for my size 10 model, we have a weight of 10.05 ounces. In the Nike Metcon 9, we have a weight of 12.9 ounces. And then in the Nike Air Zoom TR1, we have a weight of 10.6 ounces. The heel to toe drop in the Air Zoom TR1, I don't necessarily have. I reached out to Nike's team, they didn't really give it to me. However, it does feel to be like 3 to 5-ish millimeters if I had to guess. In the Nike Metcon 9, I believe this model's heel to toe drop is 4 millimeters. Nike has also not posted the heel to toe drop for the shoe, but all the other Metcon models to date have been 4 millimeters. So I feel like it's a pretty safe bet to assume the shoe is also 4 millimeters regarding its heel to toe drop, because why would Nike also not mention that if they did change it? In the Nike Free Metcon 5, we have a heel to toe drop of 5 millimeters. All three of these models have removable insoles, so you can take them out and put your own insole in. What I would say is if you get the Air Zoom TR1, be conscious of the insole you use, because we do have that at the Air Zoom packet. So some insoles I could see having conflict with that Air Zoom packet in this shoe. All right, so now let's do a construction overview of all three of these models. So up here on the toe box, you have an extended outsole layer that wraps up on all three of these shoes. It biases the medial side or the big toe side on all of these models. Looking at the upper constructions in the Nike Free Metcon 5, you have a mesh upper with some textile and synthetic overlays that cover the toe box for additional protection. And then this wraps up through the midfoot. And then you have some overlays back here in the heel and an additional layer of support back here in the heel as well. In the Nike Metcon 9, you have a mesh upper with haptic overlays that bias the medial side of this forefoot, and then you also have some more layered materials throughout for additional rigidity, and you have this rubber overlay on the lateral and medial side of this shoe to give you additional protection. In the Nike Air Zoom TR1, you have that more mesh slash textile overlay with some synthetic overlays up here in the forefoot, and then on the midfoot here. This model's upper is interesting. Like, it has some breathability, but it also isn't the most breathable for being like a hit or athletic focused shoe, so it's really interesting. Looking at the midfoot constructions in all three of these models, in the Nike Free Metcon 5, you have 4 core eyelets that wrap up. This tongue construction is a booty style tongue, but you do have a little bit of a slit here to help get the shoe on. Something with the Nike Free Metcon 4 is it could kind of be a pain to get on at times, so this kind of helps mitigate that issue. In the Nike Metcon 9, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 core eyelets that go up. The tongue itself does have a gusset, and there is an additional lace lock feature up here to give you additional support with that tongue security as well. In the Nike Air Zoom TR1, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 core eyelets that go up with a 6 back there for lace lock. Looking at the midsoles of these shoes, you have the Nike Free midsole in the Nike Free Metcon 5. This gives this shoe's forefoot and midfoot a lot more flexibility, and then you have a more dense boot back here, and you also have some rubber overlays to help give you additional stability. Looking at the Nike Metcon 9, you have the dual density midsole that runs throughout. So on the outsides of the shoe, it's a little bit more dense. On the inside here, it's a little bit more plush. And then you also have that TPU plate back here that kind of wraps the outside of the heel and back here on the posterior side of the shoe. This rubber overlay here covers the medial and lateral midsole in this model. The Nike Air Zoom TR1 has this medium density foam. It does have a little bit more of a plush feel and ride to it. Back here in the heel, it does have a bit more density regarding its overall stability. And so as you can see, there's a lot of midsole going on with the shoe, and that's to wrap up and give you additional lateral support in this model. Looking at the outsole constructions, you have a full rubber outsole in the Nike Air Zoom TR1 with some breaks up here in the forefoot, and I find this outsole to be pretty good regarding its overall traction. The Nike Metcon 9 also has a full rubber outsole with some breaks here in the midfoot. I don't love these breaks, to be honest. I think this is a weak construction feature, so keep an eye on this if you're doing a lot of rope climbs and you are very heavy reliant on the feet, because this can start to lip away, but the outsole tread itself does a pretty good job regarding traction. In the Nike Free Metcon 5, you have some rubber tread up here in the forefoot and back here in the heel, and then some exposed foam layers here as well on the lateral sides of the shoe, and then also through the midfoot. So if you're wearing this shoe outdoors and you're doing a lot of lateral work, be very conscious of the layers here. Or if you're just wearing this shoe out and about as a daily driver, be very conscious of the midfoot and how this is interacting with like puddles or dirt, etc. You'll want to keep an eye on this to make this shoe last longer. And then once again, all these shoes have removable insoles, but if you have additional questions on the construction of any of these models, drop a comment down below. That wraps up my review breaking down the differences between the Nike Free Metcon 5, Nike Metcon 9, and Nike Air Zoom TR1. If you have additional questions on any of these models, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. As always, I have reviews on every single one of these shoes. I also have links to buy them down below, so definitely check them out if you are interested. But as always, y'all, drop a like on the video, drop subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.